Hi everyone! I hope you're doing well today. Welcome on the ADHD Melly Show. So today I'm going to have Dan Roth is going to be there at the last minute because I had a cancellation this week. And I'm very thankful that Dan Roth wants to talk about ADHD with me today. So I'm very happy about that. So if you want, please, if you're on Twitch, please subscribe on my channel. If you're on YouTube too. And if you do see this, on any social media, please just follow me. I'll be so happy to chat with you guys. So if you want, so now let's introduce Dan Roth. We're going to talk about ADHD and women empowerment today. So welcome, Dan.
Hey,
So how
Melly.
are you today?
Good. I'm so glad I could be here with you. I know it was last minute. We've all been there. And what's more ADHD than jumping on a live last minute? So I'm happy to do it.
Yeah, it's true. We're always like new project at the last minute. You're very right on that. So can you a little bit introduce yourself to the people that don't really know you?
Sure. So first, I'm ADHD. I think that should go without saying. I was one of those people that found out very early. I believe I was like 7 years old. And I've been on the ADHD journey ever since. Right now, I am a global recruiter. I'm an executive career coach. I also do a lot of work with women's empowerment, neurodiversity, um, and diversity, equity, inclusion. So there's a lot that I do, which is also very ADHD. Um, but almost everything ties back to neurodiversity.
So why did you decide to implicate yourself in woman empowerment and ADHD? I know this because you have ADHD, but why woman empowerment?
So I grew up in a family where my mother was a very strong figure in my life. And being somebody with ADHD, one of the things was that she was a teacher. And I was constantly fighting with her over the 504, over my learning and development plan. And when I got older, in my late high school, early college, I realized how much she had done. So really, it was a natural progression because everything I do is to honor my mother, um, with how much and with how she supported me while I was dealing with the worst times with my ADHD. Quite frankly, if it wasn't for my mom, I would not have graduated high school. I doubt I would have graduated college. And for sure, I never would have been where I am today. So that's how I got into women's empowerment.
So for you talk a lot about your mother. So did she did a lot of research to help you? Or I know that we are like more older people, so at that time ADHD was not something that was very common to have or diagnose. So I do understand that your mother was like, what I'm doing now, I never expect that for my child. It's normal. There was not a lot of studies, and it was more hard to find books about it because internet was just at the beginning, so finding some resources was very hard. So how did she try? I know she tried her best to make sure that you can go to college and fulfill what you needed to do to succeed. So what was the most thing she did to help you progress with your school, because that's the hardest thing with for ADHD, because we have difficulty with education, with getting educated. It's not because we are not intelligent; it's because our brain is working differently. So how did she manage to help you succeed?
So you're absolutely right on that. There wasn't a lot of knowledge about ADHD, and I don't want to present a false narrative. My mother and I did not get along when I was going through school. Um, but it was because she was taking me to coaching, she was taking me to specialists, she was taking me to therapy. She was sitting down and creating a schedule for me so that I could figure out what I needed to do to pass. Um, she did all my homework. She kept tabs on me. And at the time, like in high school, you think that it's just a burden. But once you get older, you realize that everything that they do is out of love. She fought like heck for me to get the learning plan that I needed, to get more time on tests, to be able to walk around. Um, it was all, she did all the little things to advocate for me that I couldn't do for myself.
Yeah, it was mostly the same thing with my own mom. I was like almost crying when it was a time for homework. I didn't want to do them. I do really understand because she was similar to your own mom. She always tried her best for me to succeed. And when you're a teenager, it's like, why are you pampering me like that? I want to be a little bit more free of you because hormones, because you grow up and you want to be independent, and you have the impression that your mom does not want you to be independent, but at the same time you need this because you have ADHD, and maturity come a little bit later. When you have ADHD, sometimes you're a little bit more immature when you are a teenager, and it's more difficult to focus because of that. You want to do the other things that the other kids are doing. At the same time, you're not at the same point of your life of that. You're not necessarily as mature than the other kids because of your ADHD. That's okay. When you get older, it's getting up to the same age than anybody after that. But when you're like 14, 15, sometimes you can have the maturity of somebody that's 13 or 12. It's normal because of the ADHD. You have difficulty to learn. It's normal. So yeah, I do truly understand that. So what are you doing to help other people for their empowerment? What is your action on that, on women and people in general that ask you for help about ADHD? What will you say to that person?
So there's a lot of things. So I've been an ADHD coach. Um, for a long time, I thought that I was going to be a certified coach and that was going to be my career choice. But what I did is I really started doing a lot of research. And that's where I started. And then I started mentoring high schoolers that have ADHD. Um, and after that, I realized where my special value was in helping parents understand what their kids are going through so that there's not as much dysfunction within the family dynamic. Now, what do I do now? Well, there's a couple things. The first is that almost everything that I do has to do with women's empowerment. As a recruiter, I talk to women about making sure that they know their value and making sure. So in the United States, I don't know how it is in Canada where you are, but women on average make 80 cents on the dollar. So I talk about how they could figure out the proper value for a position in their field and how to negotiate to get a higher salary. The other thing that I do is I run a women's empowerment series. Uh, it's every month on LinkedIn Live, and we talk about gender and racial bias within the workforce and social media. On top of that, for those that know Clubhouse, I run the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Recruiters Club. Um, and we talk about everything from women's empowerment to diversity hiring, equity generation. We talk a lot about mental health. Today, I'm running a room on how buzzwords create toxicity uh, within our mental health, so on and so forth. So there's a lot of work that I do in regards. And then for ADHD specifically, I mean, there's not a day that goes by that I don't talk about it.
So, how is the response on that woman? Because maybe some people will say, I'm not me necessarily, but other people will say it's a man. How he can put himself in woman's feet? How will you respond to that woman? Well, it's a man. How he doesn't know those things? What will you respond to people that are not very understanding of that?
So, first of all, I'm not trying to step in a woman's shoes. I'm never going to understand what it's like to be a woman. Um, what I will say is that one of the things that happened to me is that when the pandemic hit, I lost my job and I became a full time parent to I have twin 2 year olds. And throughout this, one of the things that stood out was how few men actually have to step in and be the full-time parent to understand what it's like to be a stay-at-home mother, in a lot of ways, to understand all of the idiosyncrasies and how much work it is. Um, and what it's done is two things. One, it's given me insight, and that I never would have received. The second is that I have so much of an appreciation for what women do, so much more. And I love my wife so much more knowing what they go through. So I have a bit of a different perspective. The other thing that it's allowed me to do is, as a recruiter, I'm able, we talk about transferable skills, so skills that somebody could utilize from one profession to another. And the thing about it is, as a stay-at-home mother, there's so many skills that you go through as a caretaker that you could use when interviewing. So parents deal with time management, parents deal with risk management, conflict resolution, uh, planning. So there's so many of these different things that without going through this, I never would have known. And now I have this ability to help more and more people. So to be quite honest, I don't generally get that response. My work has really kind of spoken for itself. But at the same point, I will never say to a woman, hey, I'm trying to be you. I know what it's like to be you. I can't. So that acknowledgement is a big thing.
So I'm giving you an now you said that you're parents of twin. You know you have ADHD, right? How do you manage to take care of twins or taking care of children? I'm not saying that a person with ADHD are not able to take care of children. I'm saying mainly that tasks are difficult for us to do naturally, you know. So what do you do to be able to take care of little human? Do you do some list? What will you say to a woman or anyone that has ADHD and has to be a caregiver or a full-time parent to children with ADHD? How do you manage to do that?
So I'm going to be very honest, and I'm going to share something that I don't normally share. So, because I think that this is the right place to do it. Uh, when I was, and I promise you I'm getting to answer your question. When I was 21, I decided to go off ADHD meds. And I am not, first of all, let me say, I don't care whether you're on or off meds. This is not about what other people are doing. This is about me. Um, so I went off meds because I wanted to prove to myself I could do it on my own. I realized over time that I still had a lot of issues, a lot of lapses, a lot of times where I would get very hyper focused on certain things, without my medication. So about right when we found out that we were pregnant with twins, I made a conscious decision to go back on medication for the first time, in about, so I'm 37, I just turned 37. So for the first time in 15 years. And I did it because of the fact that I knew in order to be the best version of myself, I couldn't do it on my own. And that's not to say medication fixes everything, but for me, I had to realize that I had to advocate for myself, and going on the medication was me advocating for myself. So, you know, as a parent, there are things that just are intuitive. So I'm a really, really, really good father in a lot of ways, but there are times that I'll get tired or I'll forget. And it's just a matter of doing the best that you can. As long as you're not making some unheard of mistake, it, you just have to work with your spouse or partner to figure out where your gaps are and be able to fill them. But I mean, ADHD parents have existed since the beginning of time. It's just how do you be your best self?
So now you have daughters, so there's 50% of chance they have ADHD. I don't know if your spouse has ADHD or not, but they have 50% to have ADHD. So if they are ADHD, I don't know how old they are now, but I give you when they are like 5 or 6, you're going to be noticing something that is maybe not
Hmm.
ADHD. How will you parent those girls to be able to be like you, being able to study school and be able to go to college? How your perspective will have changed through when you were kids to now parenting maybe children with ADHD? There's not sure, but maybe
So, being ADHD, I'm hyper vigilant because I think I almost have an expectation that one of them will be. And if I'm being honest, I do think one of my daughters has um, has elements of ADHD. She gets very hyper focused. Um, it's hard because even sometimes, even when we know the correct way to go about things, when we're dealing with somebody close to us, we can still get frustrated. So I think that there's two components. One is that I have a really good understanding of what they're going to need and how I achieve. But at the same point, I also need to understand that they're going to have to make their own mistakes, just like I did, because that's the only way to really learn. So I'm going to support them in every way I can. If they need a plan in school, then I'm going to get that worked out. I'll be able to explain to their teachers at home. I have a really good understanding of what they're going to potentially need. But I think the biggest thing that I can impart on my children is to be okay with it and to understand this is part of who you are. This is part of what makes you special, and not feel like it's this it's this red X on their chest that they should be ashamed of. We are who we are, um, and that's really all that matters.
Yeah, it's true. So if we're going more on the career and etc., because you're a recruiter, when somebody with ADHD or even autism comes to you and they want to change career or simply they want to try to have a job or a career, for me it was very hard to find a job because it's almost impossible to find a job or an employer that will understand your needs. So as a recruiter, would you prefer they say they have ADHD or you would rather they don't say they have ADHD?
So this is where I'm very different. Um, so for the majority of my life, I hid the fact that I had ADHD from employers because I was told to. Um, but what would happen is that I would do really good during the interview process, but then I would get into the position and the employer had to think, well, who is this person that we just hired? Because I was needing more time to learn things, and I was very fidgety, and there was just so many idiosyncrasies with my ADHD that I had to overcome. So when I lost my job due to the pandemic and I came on social media, for the first time in my life, I was very open about my ADHD. And the thing is, even among ADHD experts, a lot will still tell you to hide it. I don't buy that. For me, we have to be open and honest. We have to have the ability to be open and honest about what we need in order to be the best version of ourselves. We have so many gifts that we could give to an employer. We have so many skills that set us apart that I don't want us to have to hide. But, and the thing is, that may alienate us from some positions. But if somebody's going to judge us for being ADHD, I don't want to work there. I don't want to work at that company. So be open. I tell people to be open and honest. And the other part of that is if they need accommodations because of their ADHD, then after they have the company fall in love with them, once they get to the hiring manager, you could actually set up um, stipulations within your contract asking for accommodations to be made. So that are going to protect you and assist to make sure that you're able to be the best version. So, in short, Yes, I want everybody to. I want more and more people to tell me, yes, I have ADHD. I own it.
So, do you think that employer are aware of ADHD or are educated enough with ADHD and ADHD employment? What should they do, the employer, to know a little bit more about that and to have the acceptance to accept a ADHD person or even a autistic person in a position in their employ and their company?
So, quite frankly, and again, I don't know how it is in Montreal or in Canada. I don't think enough doctors are ADHD specialists, much less employers. Um, there's a big gap with employers that are aware or know, and most of the time, if they are, it's because they know somebody that's on the autism spectrum disorder, that has autism spectrum disorder, or has ADHD, or Asperger's or Down syndrome, whatever the case may be. So employers can be a little bit intimidated and think that there's going to be a huge cost associated with bringing somebody on that needs accommodations. The reality is there may be some cost. Like, I'm not going to say that there's not, but there's there's easy ways to accommodate that. Just and it really just comes down to understanding. If you're a boss and you're willing to understand that you have somebody that does things slightly differently than you're used to, that's half the battle right there. So just having an open mind is where we need to start.
Yeah, it's true. And at the same time, it's mainly the same thing in Canada, I would say. I think it's the problem is all North America, There's not enough doctor on ADHD. Or sometimes psychologists are not really aware. They know ADHD because they study it, but they still have this little thinking in their head and they're not very good. I've seen a lot of psychologists when I was young. There's no psychologist that I've seen that they knew enough about ADHD to be able to get to me. And I was scared for a long time of psychologists or therapists and stuff like that because I was so scared they won't understand anything and I was
Yeah.
talking for nothing or they're going to say things stupid to my parents like I was retarded and stuff like that. Yeah, I got this. So which is not true. It's only that as I have ADHD, sometimes I get distracted by something else because what you're saying is annoying me. So it's not because I'm retarded. I just don't want to listen to you. It's not the same
Yeah.
thing. So, do you think that you said there's not enough doctor and therapists and stuff like that? That is true. And at the same time, I think about both governments, can be Canada or USA. They should have some program for people to integrate there's a lot for autistic and Down syndrome. There's way more for those people because sometimes it's harder for them than ADHD, but they should have some program that helps the employer that gets an ADHD employee to get those little fee more they have to get to employ an ADHD person. Like, I don't know, their own space to be without noise, and etc. etc. Or because they can only work 7 hours a day instead of 8 or something like that. I'm giving you an example. The government or maybe they should have at least some resources for those employers that want to integrate different people, neurodivergent people in their in their company and make it work. That's what I think. What do you think about that? Do you think there should be more resources for people like us?
So I think that there's a lot of resources out there, maybe not government related. Um, I'm going to play devil's advocate for a minute. So I think the problem with saying that governments should have programs specifically, and I'm not disagreeing with you. Like, I want to make it clear, I'm not disagreeing. The but the issue is that all these programs cost money, and there's accommodations that need to be made for basically anybody that's going through anything. So I think sometimes uh, government resources could be, it's not always financially viable because, you know, and rightfully so, accommodations need to be made for women coming back from maternity leave. Accommodations need to be made for people on the autism spectrum disorder, Down syndrome. There's so many different conditions that require some level of accommodation. Now, a lot of the accommodations may have commonality. So if that's the case, maybe just one overlying thing could be done, or maybe companies can get tax breaks or apply for grants that provide them additional resources to make these accommodations. But I think it really comes down to the company itself. Um, I don't think every company needs government funds or government resources to do it. I think that they just need to acknowledge and take control and make the changes that they need.
Or if it, I'm giving another example, maybe they could, if the company wants to, they could have the option to have somebody that knows about ADHD, that are simply sorry. Well, sorry, I forgot to take off the alarms. So yeah, it should have some It should have some. If you want to have somebody that talks about ADHD, autism, and give some tips to the employer how to accommodate those people, it should be only that. It doesn't need to be only money. It could be at least some things like that, Or there's more coaches that come in to help company to teach them about ADHD and accommodation, stuff like that, because like I said before, not a lot of people know how to deal with ADHD because they don't have ADHD, or they simply does or they have bad experience or something like that. I don't know, maybe they had a bad experience before, I don't know. So yeah.
No, absolutely, and I agree with you. And you're hearing my daughter. She just brought over um, her little letters to me.
That's cute.
So, but no, you're absolutely right. And we could use somebody that comes in and does teaching engagements for employers, but at the same time, like, at what point? Because do you wait until you have somebody that admits to being neurodivergent, or do you do it ahead of time? Do you mandate that everybody gets it done by a certain day, um, or a certain point in time? Okay, Brooklyn, here, Daddy's on video. Haley, Haley, do you want to come up? My daughter is loves being on video.
Hello.
This is Haley.
She's cute.
Thank you. This is my mini me.
Hello. So I will ask if there anybody has question, if they want to ask you, or if you want to say something else that I didn't say. So if you want to just say something that you have in mind now that you think that can help women empowerment with ADHD. So if you want to say something about that, you can go ahead and talk a little bit
Sure.
more about it, about what you
So,
do.
so the thing about it is we understand that um, women are less likely to be diagnosed early on with ADHD, as a lot of things show up later in life. We also happen to know that women mature faster than men, on average 3 to 4 years at a time. So when you she wants to talk. Um, so, oh, Brooklyn, I can't hear. This is twin life. Um, so when you take into account all of those things together, and the fact that men mature slower than women, and then you take the extra component of the ADHD, there's a lot of challenges. But for the women's empowerment, I think the thing with it is that women in general have this. This is just based on my experience as a recruiter, is that women are less likely to ask for help when they need it, um, less likely to push for what's needed. So my biggest thing with women that are neurodivergent, but also in the job market, is you now have to be twice as responsible to yourself to ensure that you're gaining the equity and the accountability from the employers that you deserve in order to be successful. So it's really a matter of putting your foot forward and demanding that that companies accommodate you for what you need, because you absolutely 1000% deserve it.
So I have a big, it's not a question, but she has an opinion. Anna Brazil. And by the way, thank you so much for Kenneth Lang for being here too. Thanks so much. And Anna Brazil, she say, I, Dan and Melly, on the suggestion of government program, Vocational Rehabilitation Agency does offer services to help people with disability in getting into college and getting job. Unfortunately, the funding is inadequate in my opinion, but it is a route that ADHD can look into. If more employer partner with VRA, it would really open up opportunity for people with ADHD. Yeah, it's true. And this is in the US, I guess, Anna. So
Yeah, it
yeah.
is.
So do you know this program?
I'm not as familiar with it. I used to be really in depth with my knowledge of all the different programs, uh, but it's been a couple years since I was that involved. That being said, there's so many resources out there, and Anna is 1000% right. But here's the thing: I hate the term rehabilitation when it comes to ADHD, because, and I know that that's not your point, Anna, but when I see that, rehabilitation gives the connotation that we have to recover from something. ADHD is part of who each of us is, and can you not go in front of Daddy? Um, and we have to own that. So, even right there, proof goes to show that government agencies don't know. It's it is what it is. Um, it just doesn't make me very happy.
It's okay. I cannot talk about it because I don't know it. So if anyone does anyone has other question, we'll also be happy to respond to you. So I'm going to keep in a minute. If you have another question or a comment about ADHD, or you want to ask something to Dan, just go ahead. I'll be so you we will be so happy to listen to you. So if you don't know me, you probably know that my first language is French, so sometimes why I have a little bit of difficulty with my speaking sometimes and my accent. So this I say it. So yeah, and also if you want to follow my website, the ADHD Melly Show, you will be able to see the podcast. There's a podcast each Monday or so. So if you want to look into that, I'm giving a lot of tips on ADHD and how to manage it. So yeah, she has a comment. Yeah, it's true that rehabilitation is a bit weird as a term, but maybe it's an old program too, and that time they had other vision on things, so that's maybe why it's rehabilitation, which should not be. So if nobody asked, do you have something else you want to say, Dan, before we're leaving?
So I just want to show my appreciation. I love that you do this every week. Um, it's an amazing opportunity to talk about things that need to be talked about. Um, and if you ever need, again, I'm always here. A lot of what I do is focused on this area, so we need to be more open in talking about ADHD and have other people understand that it's okay. This is not a disability. This is who we are. This is what makes us special. And feel confident in your own skin. I know it's tough sometimes, but this is who we are.
Exactly. We
So
cannot change it. We're ADHD. We're born with that. It's not like it's something that happened after life, or yeah, and if you don't cure it with your own, I'm not saying necessarily with medication, but I know there's a lot of tips like planning accordingly every day and stuff like that. There's tips that helps you. Like I have a new series on my podcast that I call Cure ADHD. It's not really curing ADHD, but it helps on with ADHD management. So I call it cure just for fun. It's not. We know it's not really that, and that this is very important because you have to embrace your ADHD. And yes, you have difficulty doing some stuff like basic tasks like washing your clothing. Sometimes you just don't want to do it. It's like your brain does not want to go do it. You just sometimes in your head you do the task, but physically you don't move. so so yeah, that's a little bit how it is sometimes ADHD. That's why I decided to create that little category on my podcast. So if you want to watch that, is the ADHDmillishow.com. You will also be able to see the next guest for next week because I always write my guests there so people know what's coming up. So we're going to leave you now. Since you have questions, so I want to thank you so much, Dan, for being here. Take that 30 minutes with me today at the last minute. Very easy, like you say. So thank you so much, and I hope I'm going to talk to you again very soon.
you will, and don't forget, New York bagels are better than Montreal bagels.
So bye. See you next time.
Bye.